His last words were, "Tamam Shud." No ID, no answers, only one clue. December 1st, 1948, 6:30 in the morning, Somerton Beach, just south of Adelaide, Australia. A jockey named Neil Day was riding his horse along the shoreline when he noticed a man slumped against the seawall, sitting upright, legs stretched out, ankles crossed almost casually, as though he'd simply sat down to rest and never gotten back up. The night before, at least 2 separate groups of passers-by had noticed the same man in the same spot. One witness later recalled seeing him raise his right arm into the air and then let it drop, a strange, deliberate gesture that no one thought twice about at the time. People assumed he was drunk or asleep. Nobody approached him. By morning, he was dead. There was no wallet, no identification of any kind. And when investigators looked closer at his clothing, they found something stranger still. Every single tag had been deliberately removed, not torn off in an accident, cut out, cleanly, from every garment he was wearing, as if someone had wanted to make absolutely certain this man could never be traced back to where he'd come from. His shoes were polished to a near-mirror shine, the kind of clean that doesn't happen if you've spent any real time walking on sand or rough ground. In his pockets, police found a strange assortment of items: a comb, a box of matches, an unused second-class rail ticket to a nearby town, a pack of chewing gum, and a pack of cigarettes that, oddly, contained a different, more expensive brand of cigarette than the packet itself was labeled for. No cause of death could be established. The pathologist who examined him believed, based on the body's condition, that he had likely been poisoned. But exhaustive toxicology testing found no trace of any known poison in his system. Nothing. He was given the only name anyone could offer him: the Somerton Man. His body was embalmed. A plaster cast was made of his head and shoulders in case it was ever needed for identification. Then he was buried, sealed under concrete, in ground specifically chosen so the grave could be reopened later if new evidence ever surfaced. For 74 years, that grave remained the only physical trace of who he might have been, and the strangest clue of all hadn't even been discovered yet. It was still sewn into a pocket no one had thought to check. Months after the body was buried, officials going back over the evidence found something the original examiners had completely missed: a tiny, tightly rolled scrap of paper sewn into a small, hidden pocket inside the man's trousers, a pocket so easy to overlook that it had escaped notice during the entire initial investigation. When the paper was carefully unrolled, it revealed 2 printed words in an elegant, unfamiliar script: Tamam Shud. A police reporter recognized the phrase as Persian and suggested investigators track down its source. The words turned out to come from the final page of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a centuries-old book of poetry meditating on fate, mortality, and the fleeting nature of life. Translated directly, the phrase means, "It is ended," or more simply, "It is finished." A man with no name had died with the literal words, "The End," sewn secretly into his clothing. Investigators searched for the exact book the fragment had been torn from, and remarkably, they found it. A man in the nearby suburb of Glenelg came forward, saying he'd discovered a copy of the Rubaiyat discarded in the back seat of his unlocked car around the same time the body was found. He had no idea how it had gotten there. When police compared the torn final page of that book to the scrap found in the dead man's pocket, the edges matched exactly. But the book held one more secret. On the inside of the back cover, faint indentations remained from handwriting that had once pressed onto the page. Words written on a sheet now lost, but legible enough to read from the impression left behind. A local, unlisted phone number, and beneath it, a short sequence of capital letters arranged in lines that looked unmistakably like a code. To this day, no government cryptographer, military intelligence analyst, or independent code breaker has ever definitively cracked it. The unlisted phone number led police directly to a young nurse living near Somerton Beach. She gave her name only as a pseudonym to protect her privacy, known publicly for decades only as Justin. When shown the body, she did not deny knowing him outright, but she also gave no clear, complete explanation of who he was. What she did confirm was this: years earlier, during the war, she had given a copy of the very same book, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, to a man she'd known at the time. His name was Alfred Boxall. For a brief moment, investigators believed the case was solved. Boxall, surely, was the Somerton Man, except Boxall wasn't dead. He was found alive and well in Sydney in 1949, working an ordinary job. His own copy of the Rubaiyat still sitting on his shelf, its final page completely intact, with Tamam Shud still printed exactly where it belonged. The dead man's book and Boxall's book were two entirely different copies. So who had torn the page from the version found in the abandoned car? And who was the man at Somerton Beach if he wasn't connected to Boxall at all? The mystery deepened further when investigators learned something else about Justin. Not long after the body was found, she gave birth to a son. That son grew up with an unusual, rare physical trait, an inherited ear deformity present in only 1 to 2% of the population. The Somerton Man had the exact same rare trait. Justin was questioned repeatedly over the following decades. Each time, she gave partial, careful answers, confirming small details, declining to elaborate on others, and reportedly asking, late in her life, only one question of researchers still working the case: whether the dead man had been a spy. She died in 2007, having never given a complete account of what she knew. For more than 7 decades, every attempt at identification failed. Fingerprints sent to the FBI in the United States produced no match. A request to Scotland Yard in London yielded nothing. Dental records, facial reconstructions, international appeals through the press. None of it produced a name. Theories multiplied with each passing decade. Some believed the Somerton Man was a Cold War-era spy, killed during the earliest tensions between Western intelligence agencies and the Soviet Union. A theory fueled by the era, the uncracked code, and the deliberately removed clothing tags. Others suspected a jilted lover killed in a private act of revenge connected somehow to Justin. A few believed it was simple, undetectable poisoning, a method sophisticated enough to leave no trace in 1948's forensic testing. The truth remained buried, literally under concrete, until 2022. Using DNA extracted from hair samples preserved on the original plaster death cast, made in the same week the body was found, a university researcher and an American genealogist finally identified him. His name was Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne. Not a spy, not a soldier, not, as far as any official record showed, a man with any obvious connection to international intelligence work at all. But identifying him answered only one question out of dozens. Why had every tag been cut from his clothing? Why was an uncracked code hidden inside a discarded book of poetry about endings and fate? Why did a phrase meaning it is finished end up sewn into a hidden pocket, as though someone, possibly the man himself, wanted those to be his final deliberate words? No cause of death has ever been confirmed. No definitive connection between Webb and Jeston has ever been proven beyond her admission. And the code scrawled inside that copy of the Rubaiyat remains, even now, completely unsolved, sitting in plain sight in archived photographs available to anyone, defeating every cryptographer who has ever attempted it. Carl Webb finally has a name, but the man who died on Somerton Beach with a phrase meaning "the end" hidden in his pocket still hasn't given up his last secret. His name is still unknown today.